All right, so buckle up, because today we're diving into Dorothy Sayers' The Mind of the Maker. You probably know her from those awesome mysteries, but this book, this is a whole other level.
Oh, yeah.
We're talking like philosophy, faith, the whole shebang.
Yeah.
And get this, she uses the act of creation, like specifically writing, to kind of unpack it all.
It's really wild, actually. It's like she sat down and said, if you want to understand the universe, let's just like crack open a writer's brain.
I love that. Okay, but before we get to like the mind-blowing metaphors and stuff, she hits us with something I think we can all relate to: bad reading.
Oh, yeah.
Like seriously, the woman had zero tolerance for sloppy thinking.
Yeah, and it's more than just like being a stickler for grammar, right?
Yeah.
Like Sayers, she noticed this pattern of people misinterpreting like even simple things, you know, like missing the main point of an article or like twisting someone's words in an interview. Like it really worried her.
Ugh, tell me about it. It's like you try to explain something super clearly and it's like, bam. Next thing you know, someone's turned your words into like a philosophical pretzel.
Yeah.
So what was Sayers' take on all this?
Well, she saw it as a symptom of like this much bigger issue, you know? We are just drowning in information these days, but are we actually thinking critically about any of it? It's like, she was like, pay attention, you know? Think for yourself. Don't just like swallow everything you read.
Right. Okay, so she's not just being grumpy about bad readers. She's actually trying to like throw us a lifeline in this ocean of information overload. So how does she want us to approach this? Like, what's the first step to like sharpening our thinking?
Well, she starts by tackling this idea of law, but she uses it in like these two different ways that, I'll be honest, they kind of trip me up at first. So there's the laws that we, like, as humans create, you know, rules, regulations, the stuff we can change if we want to.
Right, like traffic laws. Don't run that red light.
Yeah.
But then there's this other kind of law she talks about.
Exactly, yeah. She calls it natural law. And it's more like, you know, just the inherent way that the universe works. Like, think gravity. It just IDES. You can jump off a building all you want, but you can't vote to, like, change how gravity works. And ignoring those laws, well, let's just say there are consequences.
It's like we have the free will to make choices, but we can't choose to ignore the reality that those choices exist in.
Yes.
Which is, like, kind of mind-blowing when you apply that to, like, well, everything.
Exactly. And that is actually what Sayers does. This whole idea of natural law, like, underpins her whole argument about morality later on. But before we get there, we got to talk about, like, the core of her analogy. This idea of a creative trinity.
All right, so get ready, because this is where, like, Sayers just blew my mind. So she uses the act of creation, like whether it's writing or painting, composing music, it doesn't matter. She uses that to help us understand these huge, complex concepts, right?
Yeah.
And it all starts with this idea of a trinity: idea, energy, and power.
And the way she breaks it down using a writer's process is just, it's really brilliant. So you start with the idea, and she compares that to like a story that's fully formed in the author's mind. Like it's it's timeless. It's like the seed of the whole thing.
Right. But then comes the really messy part.
Yes.
The energy. Right. And for like a writer, that's the actual process of getting those words down on paper. All the sweat, the struggle, the endless revisions.
And this is where a lot of people, they get tripped up because they think, oh, I'll just wait for inspiration to strike. But Sayers is very clear. Like the energy is as much about discipline and craft as it is about that initial spark.
Yeah. It's like having a brilliant idea for a business is one thing, but then actually putting in the work to like build it, market it, deal with all the inevitable setbacks. That's the energy in action.
Yeah.
But there's a third part to this trinity.
Oh, yeah, absolutely. Yeah. The power. And this one's all about the impact that a creation has on the world, right? Like, think about a book that, like, totally changes your perspective, or a song that moves you to tears, right? That's the power of the creation at work.
And here's where it gets really interesting to me, because Sayers argues that this creative pattern, this idea, energy, power, it's not just for artists. It's woven into the very fabric of how we experience life.
Yeah, you know, that really resonates with me too, because our work, our relationships, even just like trying to be a decent human being, it all kind of comes down to that same creative process.
Okay, I'm hooked. Tell me more.
It's like, if we're always creating, even in our everyday life, like who's really calling the shots, you know? It's like Sayers is kind of nudging us to ask some pretty big questions about like free will.
Okay, hold on. I can already like feel my brain starting to melt a little. Give me an example. How does free will play into all of this?
So she uses this really interesting example from her own writing. There was this one character in one of her books, and she just like took on a life of her own, started acting in ways that Sayers had never planned, and it really got her thinking, like, how much free will do our creations actually have?
Wow, it's like that moment when your kid does something totally unexpected. You're just like, whoa, where did that come from? Except, on like a universal scale.
Exactly. And it just kind of spirals outward from there. Like, think about a painting that you create. Does it have a life of its own once it's out in the world? Or a business that you pour your heart into? Does it take on its own kind of trajectory? And then buckle up, because Sayers takes it even further. She's like, what about the universe itself? Like, if there's a creator behind it all, do we have free will? Or is it all just part of some grand design?
Okay, I am feeling like chills right now. But I kind of love how Sayers uses these like everyday examples.
Yeah.
It's like writing, painting, just to kind of tackle these huge existential questions. It makes it feel less intimidating. You know what I mean?
Oh, totally. Yeah, and she doesn't shy away from the tough stuff either. Like, this whole question of free will and creation, it ties directly into another big one. The problem of evil. If there's a good God who created everything, where did all the bad stuff come from?
Yeah, that's like the question of the century. How does Sayers even begin to unpack that one?
Well, she uses this really interesting concept that she calls not being. And it's a little mind-bending, so stick with me. She basically says that not being can only exist because being does. Like, there's no darkness without light, no silence without sound.
Okay, I think I'm following.
So think about it this way. Like, evil, in a sense, is a departure from being. It's a twisting, a distortion of what is, like, good and true. Imagine a writer intentionally creating a really cruel character, not to serve the story, but just because. It's like a perversion of the creative power.
That is a chilling thought, but it makes a strange kind of sense, like choosing to focus on the darkness instead of the light,
Exactly. And it challenges us to really grapple with, like, the nature of both good and evil.
Yeah.
But Sayers doesn't stop there. She throws in another layer. This idea of a ghost in the machine. Have you ever heard that phrase before?
I think so. Honestly, it's always kind of freaked me out a little bit. What does it mean in this context?
So Sayers uses it to describe that, like, intangible spark that elevates a work from just, like, being good to being truly great. Like, you can listen to two musicians play the same piece of music. They hit all the same notes, but one of them just moves you.
Yes. It's like they're pouring their soul into it. There's like a depth of feeling that goes beyond just the technical skill.
Exactly. That, for Sayers, is the ghost in the machine. It's that intuitive leap, that almost mystical connection between the creator and the creation. It's what makes a painting sing, or a sculpture weep, or a novel just like crack your heart wide open. And she believes it's not just limited to art. It's present in any craft or any skill where someone is like truly pouring their full selves into what they're doing.
So it's like the difference between just like going through the motions at work versus feeling lit up by what you do.
Yes.
I love that.
And that brings us to the heart of why Sayers believes this all matters, right? She's not just talking about art or even philosophy here. She's arguing that this creative pattern, this idea, energy, power, it's woven into how we experience life.
So it's not just about understanding the mind of like an artist. It's about understanding our own minds.
Yeah.
Tell me more. This is where it all comes together for me.
Right. Like, Sayers wants us to look at our own lives through this lens, to ask ourselves, are we approaching our work, our relationships, even our own personal growth with that same sense of creative energy, that intentionality?
Okay, I'm ready. Give me the Sayers crash course in applying this to my life. What do I do?
Well, she suggests we start by asking ourselves a few key questions.
Okay, so Sayers wants us to look at our lives through this creative lens. Right? Hit me with those key questions. How do I actually put this into practice?
Well, she starts with a big one, the difference between work and toil. Like, are you creating something that you actually care about? Something that, lights you up, even if it's hard work? Or does it just feel like you're going through the motions, stuck in a rut, just churning stuff out because you have to?
Okay, ouch. That one hit a little too close to home.
Yeah.
I love baking with my kids, right? Yeah. That's creative, that's fun. But those spreadsheets at work, total toil. So how do we shift that energy, that intention?
Well, that's where that second question comes in. Are we approaching life's challenges as problems to be solved once and for all? Or are we open to the idea that maybe it's more about the ongoing process of creation, of constant improvement?
Okay, so instead of getting fixated on finding that perfect solution, maybe it's more about embracing the journey, like the continual kind of evolution of things.
Exactly. Think of it like a sculptor chipping away at a block of marble. You know, they're not trying to fix the marble. They're slowly revealing the masterpiece within. It's an ongoing act of creation.
That's a much more inspiring way to look at things. So if we're feeling stuck, like stuck in that cycle of toil, what's the next step? How do we like tap back into that creative energy?
Well, Sayers suggests paying attention to that feeling of discomfort we get when our lives just feel out of alignment with our true nature. You know, that feeling when something just feels off, like you're living someone else's script instead of writing your own story.
Oh, I know that feeling. Sometimes it's like I'm just going through the motions,
Yeah.
you know, like fulfilling obligations, but not actually honoring my own like creative spark.
And that, my friend, is your soul sending you a message. It's a reminder that we are not just meant to be consumers in this life, consumers of information, of entertainment, of stuff. We are hardwired to create.
That is so powerful. And it ties back to Sayers' whole point, right? Like this model of creation, it's not just a way to understand art or even God.
Yeah.
It's a reflection of who we are at our core.
Exactly. And it makes you wonder, doesn't it? If we're made in the image of a creator, then maybe by tapping into our own creativity, we're not just expressing ourselves. Like maybe we're expressing something of that divine spark within us all.
Whoa. Dorothy Sayers, mystery writer turned like spiritual guru.
Ooh.
This whole deep dive into the mind of the maker has been amazing.
Yeah, it's definitely challenged me to think differently about, well, everything. From how I approach my work to how I view my role in, like, the grand scheme of things, you know?
Me too. It's like Sayers has given us this incredible framework for understanding not just creativity, but like the very essence of what it means to be human.
Absolutely. And the best part is this is just the beginning of the exploration, right? Sayers gives us the tools. Now it's up to us to go out there and create something beautiful with them.
So to all of you listeners out there, here's a final thought to ponder. What if you viewed your life as an act of creation? What kind of masterpiece would you choose to bring into